I've been a regular at Ruby's Truck Stop Diner for 23 years, and I thought I'd seen every kind of human drama play out between these cracked vinyl booths and nicotine-stained walls. My name's Tom Brennan, and after 30 years with Phoenix PD, I've got a pretty good radar for trouble. But what happened that September morning in 2019, that's a story that still wakes me up at night. Not from horror, but from the sheer magnitude of what I almost missed. Let me paint you the picture of Ruby's. It sits right off Interstate 40, exit 285, halfway between Phoenix and Flagstaff. The kind of place where the coffee's strong enough to wake the dead, and the pie's been in the same display case so long, it's achieved historical landmark status. Truckers, construction crews, drifters, and locals like me, we all wash up here eventually, drawn by the promise of cheap food and no judgment. The morning it all went down started at 4:30 a.m. I couldn't sleep. Haven't slept right since retirement, to be honest. Too many years of third shift. Too many ghosts that prefer dark hours for their visits. So, I did what I always do. Drove the 15 miles from my place to Ruby's, claimed my booth by the window, and ordered black coffee from Dolores, who's been working the early shift since Bush Sr. was president. "You're here early, even for you, Tom," Dolores said, pouring my coffee with the practiced ease of someone who's done it 10,000 times. "Sleep's overrated," I muttered, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic like it might ward off more than just the pre-dawn chill. That's when I saw her for the first time, the new waitress Ruby had mentioned hiring. She came through the kitchen doors at exactly 5 a.m., moving with a kind of careful precision that immediately caught my attention. You spend 30 years as a cop, you learn to read body language like other people read street signs. This woman, her name tag said Margaret, moved like someone expecting an ambush. She was maybe 35, 38 at most. Dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that looked military regulation tight. Her uniform was pristine, pressed with sharp creases, but it was the long sleeves that stood out. September in Arizona, even at dawn, isn't long-sleeve weather. The forecast promised another 105-degree scorcher, and here she was, dressed like it was November in Michigan. Margaret went through the opening routine with mechanical efficiency. Coffee brewing, silverware rolling, condiments checking. But it was the way she did it that held my attention. She kept her back to walls whenever possible. Her eyes swept the diner in regular patterns. Exits, windows, shadows. When the bell above the door chimed, she'd tense for just a fraction of a second before forcing herself to relax. PTSD. I'd seen it enough times to recognize the signs. The hypervigilance, the careful positioning, the way she startled at sudden noises then tried to cover it. Military, definitely. But there was something else. Something in the way she held her left arm slightly protected, always turned away from direct view. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched Margaret work. She was good, efficient, accurate, never forgot an order. But she was also a ghost. The other waitresses, Dolores, Carmen, and Sandy, would cluster near the coffee station, gossiping about their kids or complaining about their husbands. Margaret stayed apart, polite but distant, always busy with something that kept her from joining in. Customers noticed too. Ruby's regulars are generally good people, but I heard the whispers. Why the long sleeves? Why so standoffish? Is she on drugs? Hiding track marks? That last one made me want to slam some heads together. I'd run enough attics in my time to know Margaret wasn't using. Her hands were rock steady, her eyes clear. Whatever she was hiding, it wasn't substance abuse. I tried talking to her a few times. Nothing pushy. Just the casual conversation you make with someone pouring your coffee at 5 a.m. But Margaret had walls up that would make Alcatraz look welcoming. Polite responses, professional smile, then gone before any real connection could form. "Leave her be, Tom," Ruby told me one morning when she caught me watching Margaret work. Ruby Gonzalez had owned this place for 40 years, inheriting it from her father. She was 72, tough as leather, and had a soft spot for strays. "Some folks need time to remember they're safe." "She's running from something," I said. "Or toward something," Ruby countered. "Either way, it's her business. She shows up on time, does good work, doesn't cause trouble. That's all I need to know." But I couldn't let it go. Jurier hazard of being a cop, even a retired one. You see someone in pain, you want to help. You see someone hiding, you want to know why. And Margaret was definitely hiding something. The morning everything changed was September 18th, 2019. I remember the date because it was my grandson's birthday, and I'd been up since 3 a.m., wrapping the remote control truck I'd bought him. By 5:15, I was in my usual booth, second cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint the desert in shades of copper and gold. The breakfast rush started early that day. A convoy of trucks heading east had stopped for fuel and food. 3 different construction crews grabbed tables. By 6 a.m., Ruby's was busier than I'd seen it in months. Margaret moved between tables with her usual efficiency, but I could see the strain. Too many bodies, too much noise, too many angles to watch. That's when Bradley Hutchinson walked in. I knew Bradley by reputation and two unfortunate encounters during my career. His father, Robert Hutchinson, had built a construction empire in Phoenix through a combination of genuine business acumen and strategic palm greasing. Bradley inherited the company, but none of the work ethic. At 35, he was what happened when you gave an entitled high school bully unlimited resources and zero consequences. He strutted in like he owned the place, which, knowing the Hutchinsons, he'd probably tried to buy at some point. 6'3", gym sculpted, wearing designer jeans and a Hutchinson development polo that had never seen actual construction work. 3 of his crew followed him in. The kind of guys who laughed at the boss's jokes and backed his plays because their mortgage payments depended on it. They took the big corner booth. Bradley sliding in with that sprawling entitlement of men who've never been told they're taking up too much space. I watched him scan the diner, categorizing people by their usefulness to him. His eyes passed over the truckers and construction workers. Beneath his notice, lingered on Sandy's chest until she glared at him, then found Margaret. I saw his expression change, that predatory interest bullies get when they spot someone vulnerable. Margaret was refilling coffee at table 6, her back to him, but something about her caught his attention. Maybe the long sleeves, maybe the way she kept herself apart. Predators have a sixth sense for isolation. "Hey, Winter Girl!" Bradley called out, his voice cutting through the morning chatter like a rusty saw. "Yeah. You with the long sleeves. What's the deal? Trying to sweat yourself skinny?" The diner didn't go completely quiet, but conversations definitely dimmed. That uncomfortable tension when people sense someone's about to be cruel, but don't want to get involved. I set down my coffee cup, my hand unconsciously checking for the badge I no longer carried. Margaret approached their table with measured steps. Everything about her body language screamed caution. Weight balanced, hands visible but ready. That 1,000-yard stare veterans get when they're somewhere else in their heads. "Good morning, gentlemen. What can I get started for you?" Her voice was perfectly neutral, professional, but I caught the micro-tells, the slight tension in her shoulders, the way she positioned herself to keep all 4 men in her peripheral vision, the white-knuckle grip on her order pad. "I asked you a question." Bradley leaned back, making a show of examining her. "Those long sleeves hiding something? Track marks? Cutting scars? Come on. We're all friends here. What's your damage?" One of his crew, a weaselly guy with a patchy beard, chuckled nervously. "Maybe she's got scales under there, like a lizard person. Or prison tats," another suggested. "Bet she did time. That why you're working in this shithole, sweetheart? Nobody else will hire an ex-con?" Margaret's expression never changed, but I saw her left hand move slightly behind the order pad, hiding something, protecting something. "Just coffee to start?" she asked again, her tone still professionally flat. Bradley's face darkened. He wasn't used to being ignored, especially by people he considered beneath him. In his world, service workers existed to be props in whatever drama he wanted to create. Margaret's refusal to play along was a challenge to his authority. "You know what? I changed my mind. I don't want you serving us." He made a dismissive gesture. "Get us a real waitress. One who doesn't look like she crawled out of a methadone clinic." "I'm the only server on this section," Margaret replied calmly. "But I can ask." That's when Bradley made his mistake, the move that would change everything. He reached out, fast as a striking snake, and grabbed Margaret's left wrist. "Let's see what you're hiding under the—" What happened next took maybe 2 seconds, but I saw it with the clarity that comes from decades of watching violence unfold. Margaret didn't jerk away in panic. She twisted her wrist in a precise motion, thumb toward the grip, rotating against his thumb, the weakest point. Classic military combat training. Her body shifted, creating distance while maintaining balance. But the sudden movement had consequences. Her sleeve rode up to her elbow, and the diner got its first glimpse of what Margaret had been hiding. The scars were extensive. Burn tissue covered most of her forearm, mottled and twisted. The kind of damage that spoke of extreme heat and trauma. Mixed with the burns were what looked like shrapnel scars. Dozens of small, irregular marks that covered her skin like violent constellations. This wasn't a kitchen accident or self-harm. This was battlefield trauma. But it was the tattoo that changed everything. Black ink against damaged skin. The lines slightly warped by scar tissue but still clearly readable. Dust off 2-6, wrapped around a medical caduceus with helicopter blades. Below it, coordinates that made my blood run cold. 33.4484 degrees north. 43.2633 degrees east, Ramadi, Iraq. A woman at a nearby table gasped, That's a medevac tattoo. The diner's atmosphere shifted palpably. Even people who didn't understand the significance could feel the weight of what had been revealed. Margaret quickly pulled her sleeve down. But it was too late. The secret she'd guarded for 3 weeks was out. Bradley, too stupid or too arrogant to read the room, doubled down. "Oh, this is rich," he laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "Look at this, boys. She's playing soldier girl now. What, did you get that at a tattoo parlor in the mall? Dust off? What the hell is that supposed to mean?" He looked around the diner, still trying to play to an audience that was no longer on his side. "I bet she bought it online. These stolen valor types are everywhere now. Probably never served a day in her life. Just another loser trying to get sympathy tips by pretending to be a hero." That's when I noticed the man in the back corner booth. He'd been there when I arrived, hunched over coffee and what looked like a well-worn notebook. Late 40s, wearing an old army field jacket despite the warmth. I'd noticed him the way ex-cops notice everyone. Quick assessment, filed away, harmless. Troubled maybe, but not troubled. Now he was standing, and something about his posture made every cop instinct I had start screaming. This wasn't harmless anymore. This was barely controlled violence, the kind that comes from people who've been trained to kill and have done so. His face had gone pale, then flushed, his hands clenched into fists that shook with what looked like rage or recognition, or both. "Dust off 2-6, he said it quietly, but his voice carried the kind of authority that comes from earned rank and survived horror. The diner went completely silent. Margaret froze. Not the normal tension I'd seen from her for 3 weeks, but complete stillness, like a deer that spotted a hunter. The man took a step forward, then another, moving with the careful control of someone who's afraid of what they might do if they let go. "Dust off 2-6, he repeated, louder now. "Medevac unit, Ramadi, 2006 to 2008, most decorated helicopter medical unit in Iraq. Also the one with the highest casualty rate, because they never refused a mission. Never left anyone behind." He stopped about 10 feet from Margaret, his whole body trembling now. When he spoke again, his voice broke. "My daughter wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for Dust Off 2-6. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Margaret's carefully maintained composure was cracking, her eyes wide with what looked like recognition and dread. "April 15th, 2007, the man continued. "My squad got hit by an IED followed by complex small arms fire. My daughter, she wasn't supposed to be there. Private First Class Lisa Tanner, attached to our unit for convoy security, 19 years old." His voice grew stronger, carrying across the silent diner. "The IED flipped our lead vehicle. Lisa was in the gun turret, took shrapnel to the femoral artery, bleeding out fast. The LZ was hot, taking fire from 3 buildings. First medevac couldn't land. Second one took an RPG to the tail rotor and had to abort." He paused, swallowing hard. "Then Dust Off 2-6 came. Female pilot, female medic. Everyone knew them. Captain Rodriguez and Sergeant Chen. They had a reputation for flying into places nobody else would go." Margaret made a sound. Small, wounded. The man's eyes locked onto hers. "They hovered that bird in a street barely wide enough for the rotors, taking fire from everywhere. The medic, Sergeant Chen, fast roped down into hell. No cover team, no suppressing fire. Just her and her medical bag, and more balls than anyone I've ever met." Tears were running down his face now, but he didn't seem to notice or care. "She got to Lisa, tourniqueted the leg under direct fire, but the bird had to reposition, taking too much damage. So this medic, this crazy, fearless woman, dragged my daughter 50 meters to better cover. Took rounds in her vest, kept working, kept my baby girl alive." The diner was so quiet I could hear the coffee maker's gentle bubble, the hum of the refrigerators. Everyone was frozen, watching this drama unfold. "Then the second IED went off," the man whispered. "Secondary device, placed to catch first responders. The medic saw it, that split second of recognition, and instead of diving for cover, she threw herself over Lisa, took the full blast on her back and arms." His voice cracked completely. "They told me later she held that tourniquet while she was burning, while shrapnel was tearing into her. Held it until they could get both of them extracted. Saved my daughter's life." He took another step closer to Margaret. "They told me the medic died. KIA. That's what the after-action report said. We've been honoring her memory for 16 years. My daughter named her firstborn Sarah Chen Tanner. We light a candle every April 15th. Margaret's whole body was shaking now. "Sir, you're not dead." It wasn't a question. The man's voice held wonder and guilt and something like anger. "Sergeant Sarah Chen, you're not dead. It's just Margaret now," she whispered. They had to rebuild most of me. Germany, Then Walter Reed, then she gestured helplessly at herself. They gave me a medical discharge and a new name to go with my new face. Said it would be easier to start over. Easier? The man's voice rose. We've been mourning you for 16 years. Lisa has been carrying survivor's guilt since she was 19, because the medic who saved her died. Do you have any idea what that's done to her? I couldn't. Margaret's voice broke. I couldn't save everyone. Martinez died in my arms. Johnson bled out before I could reach him. Rodriguez, she stopped, unable to continue. Captain Rodriguez? Margaret nodded, tears flowing freely now. Allison flew damaged birds held together with prayer and duct tape because she wouldn't leave anyone behind. 2 weeks after I was evacuated, her bird went down. Mechanical failure, they said, but I know better. She flew one mission too many in a bird that should have been grounded because people needed extraction. She died doing what we did. The revelation hit the man like a physical blow. He stumbled, catching himself on a nearby table. Rodriguez, too? We were told. They said it was mechanical failure, no connection to combat operations. Everything was connected to combat operations, Margaret said bitterly. Every flight, every mission. Allison and I, we had a deal. She'd fly into hell, I'd rope down and bring them out. Worked until it didn't. Bradley, finally understanding he'd stepped into something beyond his comprehension, tried to salvage his dignity. Look, I didn't know. Shut your mouth. The command came from me. I hadn't realized I'd stood up until I was already moving, my body operating on 30 years of cop instincts. You miserable piece of shit. You have no idea what you've done. I pulled out my phone, fingers finding the video I'd saved years ago. Something I'd kept for reasons I couldn't explain until this moment. You want to know who she is? I held up the phone, making sure Bradley could see the screen. You want to know what stolen valor actually looks like? Let me show you what real heroism is. The video was grainy, shot from a soldier's helmet cam. The timestamp read, April 3, 2007. A Black Hawk helicopter hovering impossibly low in a street barely wide enough for its rotors. Buildings on both sides, muzzle flashes from windows, tracers streaming past the aircraft. You could hear the pilot, a woman's voice, calm despite the chaos. Hold position. Medic deploying. A figure fast roped down from the helicopter. Medical pack bouncing. The helmet cam swung to follow her movement. A small woman sprinting across open ground toward a burning Bradley fighting vehicle. No hesitation. No concern for the bullets sparking off the pavement around her. This is Sergeant Chen, I narrated, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. April 3rd, 2007. Different day from what this gentleman described. She went into that burning Bradley 4 times. 4 times into a vehicle that could have exploded at any moment. On the screen, the figure emerged from the smoke, dragging a soldier twice her size, deposited him behind cover, turned, and went back in. The helicopter above was taking hits, pieces of the aircraft falling like deadly rain, but it held position. My nephew was in that Bradley, I continued. Lance Corporal Tommy Brennan, Marines. 22 years old. He's alive today because Sergeant Chen wouldn't leave him to burn. Has 3 kids now, coaches Little League, all because one medic decided his life was worth more than hers. The video showed Chen emerging again with another soldier, then again. The 4th time, an explosion rocked the Bradley. The helmet cam went wild as the operator ducked. When it steadied, Chen was on the ground, clearly injured, still trying to crawl toward the vehicle. Broken ribs, punctured lung, second-degree burns on 40% of her body, I said, and she was still trying to go back in when they finally dragged her to the extraction point. I put the phone away and turned to face Bradley fully. That's who you've been mocking. That's whose service you question. A woman who ran into fire over and over because someone's son needed to come home. The diner erupted, not in applause, but in voices. Everyone seemed to have a story, a connection, a relative who'd served. The morning shift at Ruby's included more veterans than I'd realized. Truckers who'd done convoys in Afghanistan, construction workers who'd built FOBs in Iraq, even a Gold Star mother who'd been sitting quietly in the corner. My son wrote about Dust-Off 2-6, she said, standing on shaking legs. Said knowing they were out there made him feel safer. Said if something happened, those crazy ladies would come get him. They got my squad mate out of Solder City, a trucker called out. Bird shot to hell. Still landed in a hot zone because he was bleeding out. Pulled my lieutenant out of an overturned MRAP, another voice added. Under fire the whole time. Margaret stood in the center of it all, looking overwhelmed and terrified. For 16 years she'd hidden from this. From the recognition, from the memories, from the weight of being seen as a hero when she felt like a failure. Bradley tried to slide out of the booth. I need to sit down. Ruby's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. She stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, looking like an avenging angel in an apron. You're not going anywhere until you understand what you've done. She walked over to Margaret, who was visibly shaking now, and put a protective arm around her shoulders. 3 years I've known Margaret. 3 years she's shown up early, worked hard, never complained, jumped at shadows, flinched when people got too close, hid those scars like they were shameful instead of proof of service. Ruby's voice rose. And you know what? I let her hide. We all did. Because it was easier than asking the hard questions, easier than dealing with what those scars meant. We failed her, just as much as you did, Mr. Hutchinson. The only difference is we did it with silence instead of cruelty. Bradley's phone started buzzing, then ringing, then exploding with notifications. His face went from red to pale as he looked at the screen. Boss, one of his crew said, holding up his own phone. We're trending. Someone's been live streaming. The company Facebook is getting destroyed. News vans are already heading here. Sure enough, I spotted at least 3 customers with phones up, broadcasting live. The modern age, where accountability traveled at the speed of Wi-Fi. 60,000 viewers, someone called out. No, wait, 90,000. It's spreading across platforms. Bradley's phone rang insistently. He looked at the caller ID and went even paler. My father. Answer it, Ruby commanded. On speaker. Let's all hear what Robert Hutchinson thinks about his son's behavior. With shaking hands, Bradley accepted the call. His father's voice exploded from the speaker, loud enough that Bradley held the phone away from his ear. What have you done? Robert Hutchinson's voice was volcanic. I've got reporters calling, investors threatening to pull out, employees saying they won't work for a company that treats veterans like this. 40 years I've built this business, and you destroy it in one morning? Dad, I didn't know she was really... It doesn't matter! You don't treat anyone like that. Get back to the office now. You're suspended, effective immediately. The board is calling an emergency meeting. And Bradley, if I can't convince them not to remove you entirely, you'll be lucky to get a job cleaning job site portables. The line went dead. Bradley sat there, phone in hand, looking like he'd been hit by a truck. His crew had already started edging away, distancing themselves from the disaster. But the man from the back booth, Tanner, he'd said his name was, wasn't done. He pulled out his own phone, dialing quickly. Lisa, it's Dad. You need to come to Ruby's Truck Stop Diner. Now. Yes, I know you're on duty. Tell your CO it's about Dustoff 26. Tell him Sergeant Chen is alive. He listened for a moment, then held the phone away from his ear as excited screaming erupted from the speaker. When it calmed, he continued. 30 minutes? Good. And Lisa, bring your kids. He hung up and turned to Margaret. I'm sorry. I should have asked first, but she needs to see you. She needs to know you survived. We all do. Margaret sank into the nearest booth, overwhelmed. I sat across from her. Partly to offer support, partly to block her from the growing crowd of people wanting to thank her, touch her, validate their own connections to her service. I can't do this, she whispered. I'm not who they think I am. I'm not a hero. I'm just broken. I have nightmares every night. I can't sleep without checking the locks 6 times. I smell burning fuel every time I close my eyes. I see Martinez dying, Johnson bleeding out, all the ones I couldn't save. That's exactly who they need you to be, I said gently. Not a perfect hero from a recruiting poster. A real person who did extraordinary things and paid the price. Someone who shows them it's okay to be broken and still standing. The bell above the door chimed, and a woman in Air Force blues burst in. She was mid-30s with captain's bars on her shoulders and a face that was already crumbling with emotion. Behind her, a man in civilian clothes carried 2 young children. Captain Lisa Tanner Chen stopped dead when she saw Margaret. Oh my God, it's really you. She crossed the diner in quick strides, and without hesitation, pulled Margaret into a fierce embrace. Margaret stiffened, then slowly, carefully, returned the hug. I'm sorry, Lisa sobbed. I'm so sorry we thought you were gone. I'm so sorry you've been alone. We looked for you. After they told us you survived, we tried to find you, but the army said you'd been given a new identity for your protection, that we couldn't contact you. Protection? Margaret pulled back, confused. They said it was for my own good, to help me start over without the weight of everything. Lisa's face darkened. That's not, Dad. Show her. Tanner pulled out a tablet, fingers flying across the screen. He turned it to show Margaret. This is from the investigation 6 years ago. Turns out someone in the Army Medical Corps was selling stories to Hollywood. War hero stories. Without permission or compensation to the actual heroes. They gave you a new identity, not to protect you, but to hide what they were doing. Margaret stared at the screen, reading rapidly. Her face went from confused to shocked to furious. They sold my story? Our story? Allison died and they sold it for a movie? It gets worse, Tanner said grimly. The money was supposed to go to a veterans fund. Instead, it went into offshore accounts. The investigation exposed the whole thing, but by then they'd lost your records. Couldn't find Margaret Chen anywhere in the system. We've been fighting to get your benefits restored, Lisa added. Dad hired lawyers, investigators. We knew you were out there somewhere. The Army finally admitted last year that you were alive, but said they couldn't release your new identity without your permission. Ruby spoke up from behind the counter. So let me get this straight. The Army took her story, sold it, hid her away, and let her struggle for 16 years while they covered up their crime. That's exactly what happened, Tanner confirmed. And people wonder why veterans don't trust the system. Bradley, who'd been trying to become invisible in his booth, chose that moment to attempt another escape. He'd made it halfway to the door when a wall of truckers blocked his path. Where you going, buddy? One asked. Show's not over. I have to get to my office. Your father can wait, Ruby said. You started this. You're going to see it through to the end. She turned to Margaret. Honey, I've got something to show you. Ruby disappeared into her office, returning with a garment bag. She unzipped it carefully, revealing an army dress uniform, complete with medals. This was my son's, she said quietly. Miguel. He didn't make it back from Afghanistan. IED, 2011. I kept meaning to donate it, but she touched the fabric gently. I think he'd want you to wear it. Just once. Let people see you the way you should be seen. Margaret shook her head. I can't. That's not who I am anymore. Bullshit. The profanity from the normally proper Ruby made everyone blink. You're exactly who you've always been. A hero who thinks everyone else's life is worth more than yours. The only difference is now we know it too. Please, Lisa added, for everyone who needs to see that heroes are real, that they work in diners and live with pain and still show up every day. For my daughters, who've grown up thinking the woman who saved me was a myth.
It took 30 minutes of gentle persuasion, but finally Margaret agreed. She took the uniform into the back office. When she emerged, the transformation was profound. The uniform didn't fit perfectly. Margaret was thinner than Ruby's son had been, worn down by years of physical therapy and hard living. But standing there, shoulders back, chin up, despite the tears on her scarred face, she was magnificent. The medals Ruby's son had earned were impressive, but they paled compared to what Margaret should have been wearing. That's when old Jim Patterson stood up.
91 years old, Korea veteran, Purple Heart recipient, meanest son of a bitch in Maricopa County. Without a word, he unpinned the Purple Heart from his own jacket and walked over to Margaret. This is mine from Chosin Reservoir, he said gruffly, but you earned it more than I did. Wear it until the Army pulls its head out of its ass and gives you your own. One by one, other veterans in the diner began stepping forward. A bronze star from a Vietnam vet, a combat medical badge from a Gulf War medic, each one pinned to Margaret's uniform with reverent hands and whispered words of respect. By the time they were done, Margaret stood decorated with the borrowed honors of a dozen veterans, each one a testament to the brotherhood of service that transcended branches, wars, and generations. Now that's more like it, Ruby said with satisfaction. She pulled out her phone. Stand up straight. This is going on the wall. The photo she took would later become iconic. Margaret in an ill-fitting uniform covered in medals from multiple eras, surrounded by veterans and civilians alike, tears on her face but standing tall. It would be shared millions of times, sparking a national conversation about forgotten heroes and the true cost of service. But that was later. In the moment, Bradley Hutchinson's phone rang again. This time, he didn't answer it. 47 missed calls, he said numbly. My father, the board, reporters, someone from the governor's office. Answer it, Ruby commanded. Time to face the music. Bradley looked around the diner. At Margaret in her borrowed uniform, at the veterans surrounding her protectively, at the civilians recording everything, at the consequences of his casual cruelty spreading across the internet like wildfire. He answered the phone. Bradley? The voice was female, professional, cold. This is Amanda Chen from Channel 12 News. I'm outside Hutchinson Development with 3 other news crews. Do you have any comment on your treatment of a decorated veteran this morning? No comment. Are you aware that several major clients have already announced they're reviewing their contracts with your company? What? No, Are you aware that the governor has tweeted that he's appalled by the disrespect shown to Arizona's veterans and is calling for a full review of state contracts with Hutchinson Development? Bradley's legs gave out. He sank into the nearest chair, face gray. This can't be happening. Actions have consequences, Ruby said without sympathy. You thought you could mock someone's pain for your morning entertainment. Guess what? The internet doesn't forget. And veterans don't forgive. The next few hours were a whirlwind. Lisa had called her base commander, who called his commander, who called someone at the Pentagon. Within 2 hours, a full Air Force honor guard had arrived at Ruby's truck stop diner to formally recognize Sergeant Sarah Margaret Chen. The media followed, of course. By noon, there were 6 news vans in the parking lot. Ruby, bless her heart, refused to let them inside. This is a private establishment, she announced to the reporters. You want a film? You do it from the parking lot. These people have been through enough without you vultures making it worse. Inside, Margaret was surrounded by a protective circle of veterans and locals. Lisa's daughters, 6 and 8, sat on either side of her, touching her scarred hands with the fearless curiosity of children. Does it hurt? The younger one asked. Sometimes, Margaret answered honestly, but not as much as it used to. Mommy says you're the reason she's alive. That means you're the reason we're alive too. Margaret's composure finally broke completely. She pulled both girls into a hug, sobbing into their hair while Lisa and her husband wrapped their arms around all of them. I need to tell you something, Margaret said when she could speak again. She looked at Lisa. That day, when the second IED went off, I didn't throw myself on you to be a hero. I did it because I saw your eyes, saw how young you were, saw someone who deserved to go home more than I did. That's what heroes do, Lisa said firmly. They save people who need saving, regardless of the cost. You saved me. You saved dozens of others. And we're going to make sure the world knows it. The formal recognition came at 2 p.m. A brigadier general had flown in from Luke Air Force Base, accompanied by an honor guard and a JAG officer. They set up in Ruby's main dining room, pushing tables aside to create space. Sergeant Sarah Chen, the general began, reading from an official document. Your service record has been reviewed and corrected. Your medical discharge has been upgraded to honorable, with full benefits retroactive to 2008. Furthermore, the following decorations are hereby awarded. The list was extensive. Silver Star for gallantry in action, Distinguished Flying Cross for heroism while participating in aerial flight, Purple Heart for wounds received in combat, Air Medal with V device for valor, Combat Medical Badge. Each medal was pinned to her uniform with ceremony and precision. By the end, Margaret could barely stand under the weight of metal and emotion. Furthermore, the JAG officer added, a full investigation into the mishandling of your case has resulted in criminal charges against 3 former Army officials. You are entitled to full back pay for 16 years of disability benefits, plus damages for pain and suffering caused by administrative malpractice. The number he quoted made everyone gasp. Margaret stared at him in shock. I don't want money. I just wanted to serve coffee and be left alone. The money is yours regardless, the officer said gently. What you do with it is your choice. But the Army owes you this debt, and we will pay it. Throughout all of this, Bradley Hutchinson sat in his booth, forgotten by everyone except the 2 truckers who made sure he didn't leave. His phone had stopped ringing, probably dead from the constant calls. His crew had long since abandoned him. He looked like a man watching his life crumble in real time, which of course he was. Ruby finally took pity on him. Sort of. Mr. Hutchinson, she said formally, you're banned from this establishment for life. If I see you within 100 yards of here, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Furthermore, I'll be contacting every restaurant owner in the state, and I know most of them, to let them know what kind of man you are. You can't do that. I'll sue. Try it, I said, standing up. I may be retired, but I've got friends in active service. Friends in city planning, health inspection, OSHA. How many violations do you think we'd find at your construction sites if we looked real close? Bradley's face went from pale to green. That's extortion. No, that's consequences. You extorted Margaret's dignity for your entertainment. Now you get to see how it feels when the power dynamic flips. He fled then, finally, stumbling out into the afternoon heat and the waiting media circus. The reporters descended on him like wolves, shouting questions, thrusting microphones in his face. He made it to his truck, a lifted F-350 that screamed compensation, and peeled out of the parking lot, nearly hitting a news van in his haste. We found out later what happened to him. Robert Hutchinson, trying to save the family company, removed Bradley as CEO within 24 hours. The board backed the decision unanimously. Bradley was given a severance package and a strong suggestion to leave Arizona for a while. He didn't leave fast enough. Veterans organizations picketed Hutchinson development. Major clients pulled contracts, The governor made good on his threat to review state contracts. Within 6 months, the company had lost 60% of its value. Bradley himself became a pariah. His country club membership was revoked. His fiancée left him. Apparently, she hadn't signed up to marry someone who'd become the face of veteran disrespect. He sold his house, his truck, his toys, and moved to Colorado where his mother's family lived. But here's the thing, that wasn't the end of Bradley's story. It was the beginning. 6 months after the incident at Ruby's, Margaret was working her usual morning shift when a familiar figure walked in. She tensed, ready to call for help, but something was different about Bradley Hutchinson. He was thinner, for one thing. The gym's sculpted muscles had given way to a leaner build. His designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple t-shirt and jeans. Most notably, he was wearing a volunteer badge from the Denver Veterans Community Project. "I know I'm not welcome," he said quickly, hands up in a gesture of peace. "I'm not staying. I needed to deliver this in person." He placed an envelope on the counter with careful movements, like he was approaching a wild animal, which, given Margaret's combat experience, wasn't far from the truth. "I've been volunteering at the VCP for 4 months, he continued, words coming fast like he was afraid he'd be thrown out before finishing. "Building tiny homes for homeless vets, learning to use my hands for something useful instead of what I used to do." Margaret didn't touch the envelope. "Why?" "Because I finally understood what I'd done, not just to you, but to every person I'd ever treated as less than human, because they didn't fit my idea of success." He swallowed hard. "My counselor at the VCP, yeah, they made me get counseling before they'd let me volunteer. He's a Vietnam vet, lost both legs to a mine. He told me something that changed everything." "What's that?" "He said, hurt people, that I was so miserable in my own skin, so empty despite all my money and success, that I had to tear others down to feel anything. He was right. I was a walking wound, spreading my infection to everyone I met." Margaret studied him for a long moment. This wasn't the arrogant bully from 6 months ago. This was a broken man, trying to piece himself back together. "The envelope?" she asked. $5,000, fundraised from our volunteer group. "We're trying to get enough to build 50 tiny homes for homeless vets in Colorado. Every dollar helps." He paused. "There's also a letter from some of the vets I've been working with. They wanted you to know that even someone like me can learn, can change, can maybe do something worthwhile with the second chance I don't deserve." Margaret picked up the envelope, feeling its weight. On the back, she could see signatures, dozens of them, messages of support and hope, from veterans who decided to take a chance on redeeming a lost soul. "Everyone deserves a second chance," she said quietly. "That's what service taught me. Sometimes you save people who wouldn't save you. Sometimes that's what makes us human. I don't expect forgiveness. Good, because I'm not offering it. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I can acknowledge that you're trying to be better. That's more than most do." Bradley nodded, understanding this was more grace than he'd earned. As he turned to leave, Margaret called out, "Bradley?" He paused, looking back. "Keep showing up. That's all any of us can do." The slightest smile touched his face. Not the arrogant smirk of before, but something genuine and grateful. "Yes, ma'am. Every day." After he left, Ruby came over. "You're a better person than me." I would have thrown hot coffee in his face. 6 months ago I might have, Margaret admitted. "But I've learned something working here, seeing all these people every day. We're all fighting battles nobody else can see." Bradley's finally facing his. That doesn't erase what he did, but maybe it can prevent him from doing it again. That was 2 years ago. Today, Ruby's Truck Stop Diner is a different place, though you might not notice the changes at first glance. The coffee's still strong enough to wake the dead. The pie's still questionable. The vinyl booths still crack in the same places. But look closer. See the wall behind the counter, covered in photos of veterans. Read their stories, written in their own words. Notice how Margaret, she kept the name, said Sarah Chen died in Iraq and that was okay. Moves through the dining room with her sleeves rolled up, scars visible, no longer hiding. The Wednesday morning coffee and courage sessions started small. Just Margaret and a few local vets, talking over bad coffee and good intentions. Now, they packed the place. Veterans from 3 states come to share stories, find resources, connect with others who understand the weight they carry. It's not therapy, Margaret always clarifies. It's just coffee and conversation. But sometimes that's enough. Bradley Hutchinson funds most of the sessions now, quietly, through the nonprofit he started. He flies in from Denver once a month, not to participate. He knows that's not his place, but to drop off checks and see what else is needed. He's built over 200 tiny homes for homeless veterans across 3 states. Still an ass sometimes, according to those who work with him, but an ass pointed in the right direction. Redemption's not a destination. Margaret told me once. It's a daily choice. Bradley makes that choice every day now. That's more than he did before. The real miracle of Ruby's isn't the viral video that changed lives or the public recognition that came too late. It's the quiet work that continues every day. The veteran who comes in suicidal and leaves with 5 phone numbers and a reason to make it to tomorrow. The Gold Star mother who finds other parents who understand her loss. The active duty soldier on leave who sees Margaret's scars and realizes it's okay to ask for help. Last month, they held a ceremony to officially rename the stretch of Interstate 40 that passes Ruby's. It's now the Dust-Off Memorial Highway, honoring all the medevac crews who flew into hell to bring people home. Margaret tried to refuse the honor, saying it should be for Allison Rodriguez and all the others who didn't make it back. That's exactly why it has to be you, General Patterson, the same one who'd pinned her medals, said firmly. You carry their memory. You honor their sacrifice by living, by serving, by showing up every day despite the pain. That's what memorial means, not just remembering the dead, but living in a way that makes their sacrifice matter. So now, when truckers pull off Dust-Off Memorial Highway and into Ruby's parking lot, they know they're entering somewhere special, a place where heroes serve coffee and scars are badges of honor, where redemption is possible even for those who seem irredeemable, where the price of freedom is calculated not in dollars, but in the weight carried by those who've paid it. I still come here every morning at 4:30, still can't sleep, still haunted by my own ghosts from 30 years of police work. But now I'm not alone in the pre-dawn darkness. Margaret's usually already here, prepping for the morning rush. We don't talk much, don't need to. Just 2 old soldiers finding peace in routine and purpose in service. Sometimes I think about that morning in September 2019, how close we came to never knowing Margaret's story. How many other heroes are out there, pouring coffee and pumping gas and stocking shelves, their extraordinary service hidden beneath ordinary lives. How easy it is to walk past greatness because it doesn't announce itself. But mostly I think about grace. The grace Margaret showed Bradley. The grace Ruby showed Margaret. The grace we all need to show each other. Because everyone's fighting battles we can't see, carrying weights we can't measure. That's what I learned in Ruby's truck stop diner. Heroes don't always wear uniforms or medals. Sometimes they wear second-hand waitress uniforms and pour coffee with scarred hands. Sometimes they throw themselves on grenades, literal or metaphorical, to save someone else. Sometimes they just show up for work every day, refusing to let trauma have the last word. And sometimes, if we're paying attention, we get to witness the moment when someone's hidden light finally breaks through, when the world sees them not as they appear, but as they truly are. It looks like Margaret Chen, standing in a borrowed uniform covered in borrowed medals, crying as she realizes she's not alone anymore. It looks like Bradley Hutchinson, building homes for homeless veterans with hands that once only knew how to tear down. It looks like Ruby Gonzalez, creating a sanctuary where broken people can find wholeness. It looks like Grace, served with black coffee and a side of redemption, available 24/7 at a truck stop off Interstate 40. That's Margaret's real legacy, not the medals or the recognition, or the viral video that changed lives. It's the daily choice to transmute pain into purpose, to transform a truck stop into a church of second chances, to prove that heroes aren't perfect people who always save the day. They're broken people who keep showing up anyway. Hooah, Sergeant Chen. Hooah to all the quiet warriors still serving, still saving, still showing us what courage really looks like. Welcome to Ruby's. Coffee's always fresh, judgment's always suspended, and redemption's always on the menu. Y'all come back now, you hear?